Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We're so happy to continue to bring the park to you through in-person tours, as well as virtual programs, our longer 45-minute virtual tours, as well as our shorter informal 15-minute weekly walks every Wednesday at 12:30. Thank you so much for joining us on another rendition of our weekly walk. Today, we're going to be taking a weekly walk hill to hill with myself, Ryan, on today, January 26, 2022. Today, we're going to be exploring two of the best hills in Central Park, best to use during the winter time, and we can get an idea of what they're best used for with our title slide here. But thank you again so much for supporting us here at the Central Park Conservancy. You may be familiar with us. We're the nonprofit private organization whose mission is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us on a weekly walk. We're going to be together again for about 15 minutes today as we explore from Cedar Hill over to Pilgrim Hill, two of our favorite hills in the park and a wonderful area to go sledding during the winter time. If you do want to let us know where you're joining us from, or maybe share a favorite memory you've had in Central Park or at one of these hills, please use the chat feature and you can let us know. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature, and my colleague Jose will be on the back end answering any questions that you might have. The last thing that you're going to see pop up are going to be some visitor polls that'll launch throughout the tour today. And once everybody has voted, I can share the results and we can see what we're all thinking. Now we are going to be jumping into our nice long walk going from Cedar Hill, located up around the east side of the park near about 78th Street, and then making our way down to Pilgrim Hill, which is located about 72nd Street. Both these hills sport a lot of beauty, whether it be statue and architecture or wonderful trees. And they both have one feature in common: immaculate hills to go sledding on during the winter time. But of course, even if there isn't snow around, we can still enjoy the beauty of the landscape that surrounds us. Now we're going to be starting our tour just over on 79th Street along 5th Avenue, an entrance to the park that we certainly have come by before and one that will probably come through again. We're starting our tour today during a pretty much overcast day. Actually, prior to walking around today, it was snowing a little bit, but right now we just have to deal with the remainder of all the wet ground. But still, plenty of beauty to enjoy even on an overcast gray day here in Central Park. And as we enter the park here at 79th Street, we can already start to get a glance at one of our first hills, which is going to be Cedar Hill. Cedar Hill is arguably my favorite hilly landscape to go sledding on, or to maybe bring a four-legged friend to enjoy. Certainly a fun landscape as we make our way closer to the hill and see some of the beautiful trees that help to give Cedar Hill its name. Now, the trees that we're seeing here aren't actually cedar trees, but these are Norway spruce trees. Very large trees that you may have learned from our past weekly walks have been the regular tree to be used at the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree since about 1983. Some very beautiful Norway spruces can be found throughout Central Park. And along Cedar Hill, we can see not only spruces like this, but other conifers like, you guessed it, cedars. As we make our way a little bit closer, we can enjoy some of the fresh snow that fell just a little while ago. Although it wasn't too much to accumulate, we can still see some nice patches, which help to really give us that wintry scene here in the park. And as we look around, we can also notice one of my favorite effects: the lightly glazed snow-topped branches and leaves of these Norway spruce trees, certainly helping to keep that wintry, almost holiday season going, even throughout these more dreary months. And as we look around, we can find beauty all over, as well as find hints as to who was visiting the landscape in the past. Here we can see an animal footprint. Any idea? One we're seeing here is more of a domesticated animal. Maybe this will help. One of my favorites to see in the park, some of the many canine friends that we have around. Certainly fun to see some of the impressions of who was using the landscape before we made it here. And as we trudge our way through some of these muddy areas, we can enjoy Cedar Hill, which at the moment is closed and fenced off. Now, this hill will open up eventually, but it is going to take something to open it up. And what we're going to be waiting for is going to be a little bit of some natural snowfall. Many lawns at Central Park will close during the winter seasons to allow different lawns and meadows a chance to rest. So they're nice, fresh, and filled with green turf during the spring and summer seasons. Certain areas, much like Cedar Hill, as well as various areas of Pilgrim Hill, will actually close off until we receive about 6 inches or more. During that time, these landscapes will open for different things like building snowmen, snowball fights, as well as, of course, sledding. And Cedar Hill certainly gets a lot of sledding action, as we can see from this photo coming from the Central Park Conservancy photo archives. Coming from actually around 2016, during this same season, actually almost exactly about 6 years ago from today, we would see a scene much like this over on Cedar Hill, with dozens and dozens of kids and adults sledding down the multitude of different hills and landscapes you can find around this area. And certainly a beautiful scene to behold. During this time, we certainly get a lot of picturesque beauty in the area after snowfall. Looking back at this photo from a blizzard that occurred back in 2013 during February, we can see how the trees, the cedars, the spruces, and even the deciduous trees transform into a beautiful winter landscape after we get a little bit of some snowfall. And certainly one of my favorite scenes to see in the park when we come through any areas that have conifers, getting to get that nice snowfall topped right on top. As we make our way around, we can also notice some of the present day features that exist, like haystacks. These haystacks aren't for hungry horses that are passing through the park, but rather to block any speeding sleighers from hitting a rock or a tree that may sit on the base of this hill. You'll find these haystacks popping up around any hill that's popular for sledding during this winter season. As we continue around, we can also see that some people have been sledding already, and we have done a few snowfalls that haven't stuck around here in New York. But when the snow was falling and shortly after, we certainly saw these hills lighting up with a bunch of energy from kids and adults coming over to sled. Just make sure if you do break your sled, you do try to get it to the nearest trash receptacle. And as we move along, I do want to launch our first poll, which is a simple one. I know we have people joining us on these weekly walks from all over the world, which is really incredible for us. So I wanted to ask, snow or no? Has it snowed where you reside? I know some people are from areas where it doesn't snow at all, so I'm really interested to see if you've witnessed any snow this season, whether it be here in New York in Central Park or wherever you reside. So we'll let everybody vote in that for a little while as we continue moving along. As we move down just a little ways, we can come to Glade Arch. Glade Arch being one of the 30 bridges and arches that exist in Central Park today. And getting the name Glade from a term which really just means an opening in a landscape. And as we come through Glade on either end, we can get a little bit more of an opening, a more dramatic one as we walk towards Cedar Hill and see that expansive hill. As we make our way through Glade Arch, we can come underneath and make our way towards our next hill, which will be Pilgrim Hill. Making our way down south now and passing through Glade Arch, we can enjoy some of the beautiful trees that line this area. And if you ever want to learn about trees, it's very easy to. You can certainly come on one of our seasonal tree tours that we offer throughout the year, or you can take the education into your own hands and download one of our self-guided tree walks available on our website. Even if you don't want to download one of these tree walks, you can also notice the signs that will exist throughout this area, allowing you to walk around and enjoy and learn about trees without having to use a computer. Coming through this area, we can take note of the longest tree walk to exist here in Central Park, the East Side Softness Walk. This walk starts just north of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and takes you all the way down to the Grand Army Plaza area near the Central Park Zoo. You'll encompass about 100 or so different species, or actually about 100 different species of trees, which is about 2/3 of the amount of trees you can find, or the species of trees you can find here in Central Park. So certainly a lot that will tell you both the common and scientific name of these trees. As we make our way down, we can enjoy some of the beautiful deciduous trees, which are really just glowing in this overcast sky, giving us a lot of their beautiful canopy structures. And looking up at the sky, I love seeing these silhouette images of the tree branches just extending over that cloudy sky. And what we can also notice during this season, we can notice nests becoming more apparent. Nests being from birds or squirrels. Some of these big clumps of leaves we can see in the trees up here are actually belonging to squirrels, and they're known as squirrel drays. D-R-E-Y. Squirrel drays are going to be often used by not only squirrels, but also possums. We do see a lot of fun, interesting wildlife here in the park. And during winter, there's no shortage of wildlife. And sometimes we can see them more visibly, like we can start to notice these drays popping up in various areas of trees all throughout the park. As we make our way down, we can take notice of one of these trees, which is standing out to me as we pass by, this tree being a European hornbeam, which is certainly a very warty, interesting looking tree. This wood is very, very hard. They are part of the birch family, and the name is actually coming from the horn-like bark, which we can see, all these kind of warty horn-like protrusions. This hard wood was often used for beams and ox yokes, which also leads to the name horn beam, as we may have guessed. Coming a little bit closer though, we can see this is one of the plapped trees along the east side Zoffness tree walk, providing us both the common and scientific name of this tree. Another interesting thing I noticed with this specific tree is that there's actually some metal fragment that the tree is growing around. And I always love seeing the ingenuity of trees and how they'll really adapt to just about anywhere you put them, sometimes growing around fences and human-made architecture. I'm not sure where this piece of metal came from or how long it's been here. Luckily, it's not one of the signs we use for our plaques. Luckily, we do take care of our trees as much as we can here, and you'll notice that the trees that we do have plaqued use a little bit different of a placking method. They are bolted into the tree, but we do put these springs on, which will allow us to know as more tension is increasing between the tree. Once there's more tension between that tree, we can take out these plugs and put them into a more shallow section of the bark where the tree won't be as affected, keeping this tree healthy and going for hopefully many, many decades. And I will end that last poll right now that I shared just earlier before. I'll share the results, and we can see that a lot of us have experienced snow so far. Here in New York, we've gotten 2 or 3 snowstorms so far, but they haven't been anything too much. They haven't lasted around that often. So even if you lived in New York, if you slept that whole day, you might have entirely missed some of the snow we had. But it looks like a lot of people have had the opportunity to see some snow. And we can see a few people haven't, and a few people, as I might have imagined, live in an area where it doesn't snow. I'm sure some of us are a little jealous, but certainly still enjoy all the seasons we get up here. I'll ask another poll in just a little bit, but for now we'll continue past this European hornbeam and come down the path to a very famous statue that I'm sure we've all seen. Even seeing it from behind, I'm sure we all know what this beautiful work of art is. As we approach the Alice in Wonderland statue, we can look at something that I'm sure a lot of people don't notice, which is a bench just behind the Alice in Wonderland statue, which is commemorating the philanthropist who's responsible for bringing it to the park, George Delacourt. George Delacourt also being responsible for the dancing clock down near the Central Park Zoo, the Delacourt clock rather, as well as the Delacourt Theater, home to Shakespeare in the park. Certainly Alice is one of his favorite gifts to Central Park, especially amongst the children that love to climb on this area. We can see this bench lovingly donated by Valerie Delacourt, helping to honor George here. And of course, Alice in Wonderland was actually a memorial in itself, creating to honor George Delacourt's late wife, Margarita Delacourt, who absolutely loved reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland to their children and grandchildren. We would see this beautiful piece becoming sculpted by Jose de Cref. And we'd see him actually modeling these characters on the original drawings by John Tenniel from the original about mid-19th century Alice in Wonderland novel. I believe that came out about around 1865 or so. But really immaculate work here, and of course, one that is larger than life, meant to make even a full-grown adult feel like a child as they approach the very large mushrooms, and Alice, which herself has doubled or tripled in size. And of course, plenty of beautiful detail to see around. We can see the sculptor's credits right here, Jose de Creft, who would sculpt this piece to be interactive, making it really a jungle gym for kids to climb around on. And we can actually notice some details that we might not often notice, like how the mushrooms, as well as the stumps along the tree, are actually footholds to allow kids or adults to climb up onto this piece. Really, really fun jungle gym interactive type of artwork we can see here, as well as notice some of the different characters that exist around it. Beyond characters like the White Rabbit, Alice, Cheshire Cat, and the Mad Hatter, we can also see some lesser known characters that you might have to climb underneath the mushroom to witness, like this little crocodile or alligator over here, as well as this little squirrel popping out under the tree, figures that are more seldom noticed here in the park. Really beautiful work, though, that we see coming from this Alice in Wonderland statue. And we can always actually notice new details. Something that I noticed that I never really found out where they came from are some of these numbers that you can find all throughout the Alice in Wonderland statue. Now, I don't have a definitive answer as to what these numbers represent, but my guess is that they might be coming from the different segments of the statue, because this statue is very, very large. And of course, it was created in separate pieces, being casted separately and then welded together. The giant mushroom that Alice sits on was cast in 2 or 3 separate parts, just to give you an idea of how many separate pieces came together to create this large piece. So these numbers, I believe, might actually represent the different pieces that would be formed together to create one big, beautiful piece. Interestingly enough, we see this piece actually cast over at the Modern Art Foundry in Queens. And we actually see the son of Bob Spring, who actually started the foundry around 1932, actually being responsible for touching the entirety of the statue to make sure there's no sharp edges or points that could hurt a young child that's climbing on top of this. But really amazing piece. Once this was all welded together, it was eventually loaded by crane on a flatbed and shipped through Queens into Manhattan, where it eventually sit here. Of course, there's a lot of mystery that exists in this sculpture. And if you've never read any of Alice's Adventures in Wonderlands, or the poem, The Jabberwocky, which is featured in Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass, then this phrase on the outside might make no sense to you. You'll find several different quotes lining the Alice in Wonderland statue, which are all taken from, of course, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass. Here we can see a quote from the Jabberwocky, a nonsensical poem that was featured in the 1871 Alice Through the Looking Glass, which reads, "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves and the mome raths outgrave." Certainly an interesting line if you've never read this poem before, and one that certainly lights up people's eyes as they visit this beautiful work of art. As we move just away from Alice, I do want to launch a second poll that I have for you, which is related specifically to Alice, and that is, do you have a favorite Alice in Wonderland character? Of course, I could only fit so many on here, but I think I got some of the major players available. So I'll let everybody vote in that as we move along, making our way to our last hill on the walk today. As we continue now, we're walking along the conservatory water, which is most often thought of as Stuart Little's home, as well as the model boat pond, where boats are sailed during the summer months. As we walk around now, we can notice the water is starting to freeze over a little bit, as well as look a lot lower than it normally is. And that's because during this time, we'll actually decrease the water down to about a foot or a foot and a half, and then we'll actually hopefully let it freeze over, which will allow public ice skating to occur on the water body. We don't often see this freezing over as much as it once did in the past, but we can look back to some of the past few years, which we did see some freeze overs occur. Like back in February 2015, we can see this photo being provided from the Gothamist, which shows a nice little family doing some hockey here on the conservatory water. And we hope this year we'll get some colder temperatures, not that we love the cold that much, but so that we can get this freezing over again and get public ice skating occurring here. If you do come ice skating in conservatory water, do just keep in mind there needs to be at least 6 inches of ice, which will be monitored in advance and posted on our website. And you do need to provide your own ice skates because there's nowhere to rent them near the conservatory water. As we make our way just beyond the conservatory water, which is still quite a ways away from being skated on today, we can come up to our last hill. And as we make our way up to this landscape, we have come to Pilgrim Hill, which during this time is a little worn down and a little dirty, but that's because this hill receives a lot of use. And of course, right now, it's not really primed for use, but given a couple more snowstorms, and we'll see this landscape transform to become this amazing sledding hill. Certainly a very actively used landscape that we see here, whether it be during the summer, sailing boats in conservatory water, or winter, kids flying down on sleds along this hill path. As we make our way around, we can go to the top where we can see that pilgrim statue in this photo on the right, sitting just atop the hill. This photo on the right actually coming from just a few years ago during another February snowstorm. So based on past pictures and records, I would guess that February is going to hold some snow for us. As we make our way back to present day time, we can walk along the base of the hill and look at the nice subtle curvatures of Pilgrim Hill. If you're looking for an area for younger kids to sled, or a hill that's not too intense, Pilgrim Hill is a great area to come to, with a very long, wide hill that offers several different sections to utilize. If those of you want more of a drastic big hill, then definitely head up to Cedar Hill. As we make our way to the top of Pilgrim Hill, we can look back at this photo from 2017, which shows Pilgrim Hill during a nice winter snowstorm. This one actually being a storm that occurred back in around December, amazingly enough. But we'll see what this area looks like after some nice snow has fallen from it, and we can pretend we're right up top right now with our sled about to launch down. Certainly fun for kids of all ages and even adults, as we can see, coming and utilizing these sledding hills. As we make our way a little bit down too, we can reflect on how sledding has been a part of parks and Central Park for quite some time. This photo, which is coming from Tom Watson in the New York Daily News Archive via Getty Images, shows what sledding was like back in the early 20th century, flying down these hills, or maybe flying off of the hills rather. Certainly you can see why we'll put haystacks in front of trees and rocks today. But certainly an activity that has always connected people to Central Park during the winter time, where our activities are typically more limited, but certainly always fun to have here in the park. As we enjoy this image just a little bit longer, I will end and share the poll results that we just launched before. And not a big surprise here. We actually have, I assume this would be the case, a Cheshire cat ruling this list, being number one with about 35% of the votes. And then, of course, Alice coming in a close second with 33% of the votes. Of course, we have the Mad Hatter, another favorite of a lot of people. The Mad Hatter being a depiction or caricature of George Delacourt, while Alice is actually a depiction of Donna, who is Jose de Crefft, the sculptor's daughter. So we see some interesting likenesses in there. The blue caterpillar has always been a favorite of mine, very inquisitive, sometimes rude, but one that often asks questions that makes you think a little bit more. Certainly some interesting characters, some of which we can find on the statue, some of which we can't. But I'm glad to see everybody has a little bit different of an answer there. I'm glad to see some people pick the King and Queen of Hearts as well as the March Hare. They tend not to get too much love. So I'll end that poll and we'll continue along, making our way back to present day Pilgrim Hill and walking up to the top of this pilgrim statue. As we make our way to the top of the hill, we can see where this hill is really getting its name from, a pilgrim statue that exists here and has since about 1885. It was erected here and dedicated. And coming a little bit closer, we can see when this area really gets a lot of visitation, which is during the spring. It's interesting that the spring and winter are the two most visited times of this area. But of course, from the pictures we have seen and can see here, it's for obvious and for good reason. This area is an immaculate home to plenty of beautiful Yoshino cherry blossoms, which during the April months really electrify this area. This photo is actually coming from a weekly walk that I took you on back in April of 2021. I believe about April 7th or so, we came by this area, or maybe April 14th, and saw this beautiful Pilgrim Hill during those fresh blooms of these Yoshino cherry blossoms. Certainly this image and its colors just make us feel warm right now. However, We are back in winter, so it is still a little chilly, but we can still enjoy the beauty of the statue, which holds its appearance year long. This statue was really coming as a gift from the New England Society of the City of New York, which formed a committee around 1879 to help create a statue like this. We would eventually see it being unveiled around June 6, 1885, with a parade included in the dedication and about 3,000 people joining us for the ceremony. This was sculpted by John Quincy Adams Ward, very famous sculptor, an American sculptor whose works you can find throughout Central Park, such as over near the mall and Literary Walk, to name a few. One interesting thing about this statue is nobody exactly knows why it was placed up here. There's not really any documentation that suggests why this would be the home of the statue. However, it has resided here ever since its original dedication back in 1885. And launching from this Pilgrim statue is really a great landmark to use as you set up your run with your sled and make it down, hopefully, to that lower pathway, extending down the entirety of the hill. And right now, again, we don't have any snow, but we can look forward to the upcoming month where hopefully we'll get a lot more snow filling in these hills and creating a beautiful landscape to go sledding in. But even though we don't have any snow right now, I'm sure there's still a couple park visitors that don't mind it being a little bit warmer and a little less snowy out here. So we can certainly enjoy the visitation and the wildlife that we have present at the moment and look forward to some of the wonderful recreation that we have lined just ahead of us. And certainly, no matter the season, there's always something fun to see or to do here in Central Park. We want to thank you for making the park look so clean and green and keeping it a wonderful landscape to use. As we come to the end of our walk here on Pilgrim Hill, we can enjoy some of the beautiful sledding hills we've seen, starting from Cedar Hill up at 79th Street and wrapping down to about 72nd, the two of the best hills to go sledding in Central Park today. I want to thank you all so much for joining us and for supporting us here at the Central Park Conservancy and joining us on these weekly walks, which we're of course going to continue to do. So please join us next Wednesday at 12:30 for another installment of our weekly walk. And of course, consider in different ways that you can learn about the park and support the park. We do have plenty of self-guided tree walks as well as self-guided tours of various topics on our website, centralparknyc.org. And of course, you can also think about how you can help support the park. The park needs us and we need the park. So what is it about the Central Park that you need the most? You could let us know by sharing a favorite memory on social media using the hashtag #TheParkNeedsUs, and we'll feature it on our social media channels. Regardless of how you use or support the park, we want to thank you for joining us today and helping to keep this wonderful landmark thriving for many generations to come. Thank you again, everybody, so much for joining us. I am going to keep this room open for any last-minute questions we haven't had the opportunity to answer. And I want to, again, encourage you to join us for our future programmings like next week's Weekly Walk. Thank you again so much for joining us here today. And from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well, see you soon.